Legend says that a sign once suddenly appeared in a town which announced, "If there are enough people interested, I will come there and reveal to you the secret of secrets and will remove all of the mystery from the mystery of life." Legend further says that whoever it was, for whatever reason, never showed up. Non-legend hereby informs you that ordinary people say that they want to know a lot more than they actually do. According to cosmic myth, there was once a most strange planet on which the creatures would not accept mail if they did not like the looks of the letter carrier. Non-mythological data tells of an earthling who once opened his own skull and looked in, only to also not care for what he saw. What can men be held responsible for? Their physical makeup, their mental condition, their emotional cycles? Well, obviously no one can be liable for aspects of themselves such as hair color that is determined by the act of merely being born. So what does that leave? Cleave. In the span of one man's lifetime, only the individual has any potential, never the collective. The mind and the question of it trying to figure things out. One man put it to his thusly, "Hey, old dear, look a here, just what the hell you think you're a-doing?" And faced with it in that fashion, it had no reply. Seating arrangements. The simple tend to take up too much room, while the more civilized will often show signs of being concerned about the amount of space they occupy. Can anyone relate this to different types of ideas and how they fit into a man's thought processes? It's easier to emotionally feel bad alone than it is in a crowd. The natural state of man's mental awareness is one of just drifting and wandering, unless something external demands its focused attention. Query: how is this related to what mystics seem always up to? Though it is quite understandable for the damp to feel that life is all wet, what is it about man that inhibits a constant remembrance of the fact that nothing stays wet forever? In the span of one man's lifetime, only the individual has any potential, never the collective. One man continually used a variety of aliases, and for no other reason than to remind himself of what little significance is a name. There is a religious cult that claims that after death, in heaven, men will find themselves separated into certain groupings which will exactly match the cliques they experienced in high school. In the span of one man's lifetime, only the individual has any potential, never the collective. A hippo and a hawk were discussing which of them was the more graceful, and their attention eventually turned to the question of what context would be appropriate by which to make such a judgment. A hippo and a hawk were discussing which of them was the more graceful, and their attention eventually turned to the question of in what context would it be appropriate to make such a judgment. Can anyone tie this to the earlier seating arrangement story regarding how the simple tend to take up too much space, etc., and its application to mental processes? A kingdom too isolationist can implode. One man had a wild body, which he eventually brought under control. He also had wild emotions, which he also managed to tame. And he lastly had a wild mind, which he also finally subdued. But after that, he began to look back and have doubts as to the actual control he had brought to bear own emotions. Not satisfied to let sleeping certainties lie, the next time they met, the head monk again tested the neophytes with this question. Okay then, which disturbs your peace the most? The fact that half the world lives in substandard housing, or that you have a sore in your mouth? Seriously. The simple don't take life seriously enough, while the more civilized take it too seriously, which leaves the rest of the field wide open for those who understand life. A man asked a mystic, is it really possible to think too much? And the mystic squinted his eyes, began rubbing his chin, and generally fidgeted about reflectively for a few minutes, then asked the man, what do you think? And the man replied, well, I'm glad you asked. Ellipsis. The only rules worthy to live by are any developed by you. Compared to the natural pleasures of the body, it seems that for similar mental experiences, drugs of various types, physical and otherwise, must be introduced. And for those of you phone in hand ready to call the pharmacist, consider this. There are two types of mental drugs, those which stimulate and those which depress. Pursuant to his desire to keep the various aspects of his life properly separated, one man would not read in the bathroom nor take a dump in the library. What do you think, time? Do those who know the secret speak in metaphors to delude or impress others, or because that is how they learned from themselves? At the heroic level, none can be cured save those who absolutely will not tolerate their illness. That sounds much easier said than done. Not only that, but if you can't do it, it can't be done. A question regarding unrecognized charitable needs. If ideas are to the mind as food is to the body, then why is there no widespread concern over mankind's condition of near neural starvation? Only two kinds of men are ever satisfied, the dead and the awakened. The more civilized you are, the more you tend to take feeling bad to be mentally based. In the span of one man's lifetime, only the individual has any potential, never the collective. A man with slack attention never wants for a friend. He is continually reintroduced to the same old aspects of himself over and over again. Taking his cue from a tag he found on some marked-down clothing, one man named his normal thinking processes torn in places. Why is it that watching other people eat can make you hungry, and watching other people sleep can make you tired, and watching other people screw can make you horny, but seeing someone else exercise their intellect in a more conscious manner has no such reciprocal effect on the observer? Those on the quest shouldn't think of their thinking as thinking, but rather as thought management. Regardless of the fact that men say they will die for their ideas, and that in fact some apparently do, it is not so. In the realm beyond the instinctive, that is, in the world of ideas, no one really gives a damn one way or the other about anything. Wow, listen to those wolves howl. Yeah, but they don't take the sound itself seriously. One mystic on his business card listed himself as agent for the obvious. A double-decker. No matter how good they feel, most people don't believe it'll last. No matter how good they feel, most people don't believe that it's good enough. One man, rather than run the risk of feeling either good or bad, decided he'd try not to feel either way in particular. According to one legend, when the tracks of his particular mystical express ran out, one traveler laid his own. And according to still another legend, that's the only kind there are. Spare yourself potential ear damage by trying to hear that which doesn't exist. Life never tells a real man to give it a rest. Sometimes I don't think you listen right. Some instructional news for those who might want to withdraw. Don't become a hermit in your own hometown. That is, don't seclude your consciousness amongst your own old mental environment. One man says, if everything can be seen as a metaphor for something else, and the something else can then be seen as a metaphor for yet something else, then where should man be looking for that which is literal and irreducible? Thought one man, after death, I'd like to come back as a dog, with all the emotions of a dog, but also with my mind still intact, but unable to interfere with the emotions. From a certain view, on the more simplistic level, many ordinary people use their human suffering as a kind of unrealized, unfocused walk on the mystical side. Having said that, do be reminded that the basis of all discomforts unique to man is in the fact that he is forever an unfinished piece of business, which recollection should make the above more sensible. To a fully realized and awakened ruler, the mind alone is too small a kingdom. Only two kinds of people don't care about health, the sick and the well. The power of sex can make the simple smile, that of ideas, the more sophisticated. But leave it to the more conscious to find a place of delight between the two, and everywhere else for that matter. And finally, is the ultimate test of a mystic whether or not anyone else ever finds him as entertaining and informative as he does. Two things. Whose connection, if any, I'll leave to you. Probably the oldest transcendental description of man is something like this, that man normally lives in a dream, and to experience life fully, he must awaken. Remember I said probably the oldest. I'm just sort of paraphrasing and putting them together from all over the world, from different eras. But that's speaking transcendentally, because if you say that to a person, that man normally lives in a dream world, and that he can in some way awaken to another state, any sane person will dismiss that if you insisted that you meant it literally. You know that. Any ordinary mind will say, well, that's silly. I know that I am not asleep. I'm awake right now. I'm not in a dream. I can touch you. I can do my eyes like this. That's just silly. There's no doubt that what you're saying is incorrect if you mean it literally. There would be a few people that would take even this, and I'm already preface this by saying it is a transcendental description of man, but there would be a handful of people who would take that literally. At least that sounds too obscure. In other words, people who could not benefit from it any more than the ordinary do, who would dismiss it. Ordinary, sane, rational people. You understand? That's, we're talking about just rough figures. 99% of the human population, if they heard that the description, or a description of man literally was that he normally lives in a dream, and that if he is to experience life fully, or more fully, he must awaken. Let's say 99%, all these figures are safe, of humanity would say that that is ridiculous and dismiss it. There would be, 0.3% of people could hear that and go, yes, oh, that's true. And they would take it literally. But you understand, they're in no better shape. In other words, they are, and they're usually considered or would name themselves to be mystically inclined. But they are deranged because it is not a literal telling. It's beyond that. So just to say, well, that's literally true, that accomplishes nothing. There's only a few people. You can figure out the percentage, which I don't guarantee their validity. I'm guaranteeing that I gave you the best shot. I don't want anybody trying to figure this out. 99% of humanity would dismiss it. Let me change it, at least then if you really try to figure it out. Because I know some of you finished high school and could probably do this. 99% of humanity, the sane, ordinary of the world, would dismiss it. Let me say that 0.8% would take it literally. That is, they're crazy. The remainder, more or less, would be those who might actually have some potential for another state of consciousness. We will also assume that anyone listening to this is in that percentage. But now is another question. Assuming that you somewhere along the way heard that, which it is an old one, I didn't make it up, it's one of the oldest and most widely used, that man's normal state, just his everyday state of consciousness, his state of being, compared to what it could be, is like being in a dream world, like being asleep and dreaming that you're alive, compared to what is possible. So let us say that the first time you heard that, some version of it, that it struck you as correct. Or if you'd never heard it before, you've heard it now, and you go, yes, that's it. Now I present a question to you. What is it about man's life? What is it in you? What is it in that statement that strikes the few people that it does strike, that it strikes them with such validity, such unquestionable validity, that I could just, that there are other descriptions about man living in a state of illusion, man living in a state of chaos, man living in darkness, but they all amount to the same thing. They all amount to the fact that compared to what a man could be, an individual man, not man collectively, that's why I kept rereading page 3b tonight, that within the span of one man's lifetime, only the individual has any potential, never the collective. In the span of one man's lifetime, the collective does not progress. There's no kind of cosmic law there, literally, but in the space of one's lifetime, what I point out to you otherwise, you cannot, even if humanity is evolving and becoming more conscious, it does not happen enough at the grand scale to do you any damn good. When I say you, an individual. Because 60, 70, 100 years is not long enough to feel anything. But what is it when you hear the description that there is a state of consciousness possible? and let's say the first time you ever heard it, you've never experienced a state. All you know is all your life you had a certain kind of curiosity, a certain kind of hunger, a certain kind of itching that you couldn't scratch, a certain kind of yearning. And you hear the description, one way or the other, that there is another state of consciousness possible for a man during his lifetime, while he's alive, not while he's dead, not some kind of spiritual afterlife, but there's some other state, possible state of consciousness or of being that is possible in a man's lifetime, that compared to that, the lives we normally lead might as well be shadows on the wall. Plato's idea, an old one, the lives men ordinarily lead is like living in this cave and it's a campfire throwing up a shadow on the wall. And you look at it and you think, well, that's my life. And you never realize that you're the one throwing the shadow, which is just a variation of, there's another state, another possible state of being that makes your normal state, man's normal state, appear to be a dream, appear to be a shadow on the wall, not your real life. It's like a sham life. It's like a baby version. It's like a pretend version. It's like a warm-up act. It's like the opening act for the real show. First time you hear that, I'm asking again, assuming that you're the type actually wired up for this, that few percentage point, that you hear it, and without any doubt, you don't need anybody else, you don't need to go look for who wrote it. Maybe the first time you ever read it, it just says that it's a fragment of some manuscript, something they found in a cave in China. They don't know where it came from, and you simply read this translation that says, the life man normally lives is like a dream. And to experience life more fully, he must awaken from this dream. And you read it and you go, that's it! You know, for the last, however old you were, 20 or 25 or whatever, that's it. That is my sin. Oh, that's it. I'm asking you, up until that point you were a sane, ordinary, well, you're a sane person. You're not part of the deranged minority. You read that and you go, yes. Now you're already outside the 99% of the mainstream who look at that and dismiss it as they should. That, well, I guess that's some kind of poetic allegory because it's certainly not true. Except a few people, as soon as they read it, they know it is true. There's nothing else to say. They don't take it literally. They don't suddenly go, wait a minute, I got to go look in the bathroom and see if I'm awake. I got to check the clock. I got to pinch myself. They have a natural comprehension that is a piece of transcendental information. It's not just allegory. It's not just literal. It's beyond both of them. It's transcendental. It's information. It's just transcendental. Now I'm asking you, how can that be? What is it about man, the few people at least, what is it that makes something so, on the one hand, ridiculous? If you look at it literally, it is ridiculous. It's insane. Now I say that on the basis that 99% of humanity would say it's ridiculous and insane. And recall, at that basis of describing sanity and what is ordinary, the majority is always right. It is they who are correct. So on the one hand, you've got it to where the majority, anyway, you've got two possible reactions to the information, to the statement. One is that it's not true. The other is people take it literally to be true. What was it in you, or what is it in those people? Well, you makes it sound more personal, doesn't it? If you take the idea of you personally. Okay. What is it that strikes people, some people, that is simply a fact? That's it. There's nothing else to be said. They don't need it proven. They don't need to discuss it. That's simply it. What is it about man's life? How can it be? The ordinary dismissed it on the basis of what I already covered. There's not much else to say. And they are not incorrect. When I say the ordinary, from your ordinary view also. If you are in the ordinary gear of mind, you know it's ridiculous to say you're asleep. How can you be asleep? You drove here, you're on the expressway, you're doing 90 miles an hour coming here, listening to radio, talking to somebody. You do all kinds of things every day. You work in a research department somewhere. You make your living by your wits. And you can say, well, it's not a dream. You enjoy life, you enjoy sex, you enjoy eating, you enjoy everything about life, the same as everyone else does. So to say that we're living in a dream, that you're in some sort of state of sleep, well, you're in a dream is really a better one, that you're dreaming this. I mean, it's silly. Everyone knows the difference. Any sane person knows the difference between being asleep and dreaming. Because if dreams get too bad, if you get any doubt, you wake up. If dreams start becoming, well, everyone knows this, if you're having a nightmare to the point that the dream is becoming frightening and it's having a physiological effect, you will wake up. Because to prove that you know it's a dream. Everybody knows that. So this cannot be a dream. You're actually living it. And you have something to compare it with. Dream world, when you're actually not conscious. So to say that this is a dream, when you've already got something to compare it to, you know what a dream world is. You know when you're just laying there and you're not really conscious, you're just dreaming you're conscious. And you know the difference. All you got to do is be sane. To know the difference in being asleep and dreaming you're conscious, and to be staying here right now and be conscious. And to hear somebody tell you you're living in a dream, you go, not me, Charlie, it's you. Anybody'd say that, you're worse than a dream. You're living in a world of a delusion. So what can it be? What is it that strikes a few people throughout history and continues to, that as soon as they hear it, they go, yep, that's it. I never knew how to describe it, but that, until further notice, that's it. I don't know how I'll ever improve on it. That is it. And that's even before they've ever experienced it. Second thing, remembering if there's any connection, I'll leave it to you. Feelings and emotions. It's well known that a sizable number of people feel extremely close to animals, their pets specifically. There are people who apparently do not. It is not something that is learned, and this is in no wise a commentary on the desirability or otherwise of feeling close to domestic animals. But I am using it because it is a commonly experienced and a well-known phenomenon, and I'm going to try and direct your attention to something having to do with emotions about which there is no common verbal ground in which to push you. In other words, as always, it's getting past the stage that there's anything that can be said directly, and so you have to speak indirectly. So, people hearing this will assume that there'll be some people who feel very close to their pets, and that there'll be people who just never have any particular feeling for animals. That's the way it is. But both of you, and people in the latter category, you're aware of the fact that the world's full of otherwise sane people. That is, if you're sane, you know just from your own experience that there are people, they're not idiots and they're not crazy, that treat their dogs and cats like little people, and that will stand right in public and say they'd do anything for their dog or cat. They sleep in bed with them. They go on vacations. Now, if you don't have that kind of feeling for animals, it's a little strange, but if you're sane, if you're just ordinary again, it's not enough. You don't take it that the people are idiots because you probably had family members, somebody like that. You know that that's just one of the things. It's like people are wired up in different ways. And I am also, to neither of the categories, whichever one you might fall in, I am also not trying now to substitute or to say that in some way that is, I'm not even trying to hint, that's not the point, that in some way one should feel closer to their pets than they do to other humans. Although there are plenty of people that would agree to that. There are people around, again, that do not fall in the category of being insane that tell you. You've all heard it. If somebody said, "We tell you the truth, I believe I like dogs more than I do most people." When ordinary people say that, it's usually on the basis of some cynicism, some sense of irony, etc. But still, you know that that is not an uncommon expression. So now, all of you, well, there is a feeling Let me repeat one more time to those, especially who do not fall in the category of being great animal lovers. This is not an inference that you should be, that something's wrong if you're not, and it's not in any way a hint or an agreement that a feeling for animals, for your dog or cat, is in any way superior to that which people feel for humans. That's not it. I'm just taking things as they exist in the world to try to point you somewhere that's not normally or not readily described or thought about. Those who feel a unusually strong attachment and feeling toward their pets or toward animals in general, but normally they'll be in possession. They'll be the master of some domesticated pet. Those who feel that not only can express, and very often will, that they feel a kind of love for their dog or cat that they damn seldom experience, except maybe with their family, their mother or father. They just say, you know, I believe I love my dog here more than I do anybody but my mother and father. And there are people who will say that without any great sense of aggression toward life. It's not that they're saying all of life sucks and everybody's an idiot and you can't trust anybody, but good old Spot. You know, he never tries to cheat me. It's not that. It's just they're expressing a sentiment that I'm getting to now that sounds as though it is based upon an unfair or a detrimental comparison to humans. To say, well, there is some superiority to animals. And there have been people do this. I threw in about my little joke, just my little aside about good old Spot never cheats me. There were all kinds of little stories or jokes, or I think I've seen T-shirts in the past about how much somebody loves their dog, and then it starts naming all the things that the dog does not do, like he won't cheat you, won't ask to borrow your car, won't ask to borrow money, or where's the keys to the car, you know, all that kind of stuff. That is based upon an unfavorable comparison to humans. But again, I'm not pointing that out. That's not the basis of this. There is simply amongst many people on this planet a feeling of, and they will call it love, affection, positive emotion toward an animal that they do not find themselves experiencing with other humans. All right. Just take that as it is with no other editorial asides. Then the question is, if those people are sane, which they are, what is afoot? How is it that someone can feel what they would very likely express as a love, an affection for their dog or their cat that they do not feel with humans in general, just in general? Or put another way, that someone can say that their dog or cat died and that they were hurt. They felt a sense of kind of loss that just maybe surprised them. It was the first time it happened in their life of a pet. And them say, you know, I'm not comparing it to my mother because, you know, it's a whole different thing, but other than maybe when my mother died, I had no idea. I mean, it just really affected me. And people say that. And again, it's not a reflection of some deranged mind. Now I'll go ahead and get to it. I'm asking you, what is afoot? Here's what's afoot. What they are experiencing is a kind of purity of emotion that is lacking between humans ordinarily. May I be quick to point out to any civilians listening to this does not mean it's superior. It does not mean that, you know, a dog will love you a lot more than humans. It's not that. And that's why this is so tricky. There is an affection possible between a human and a non-human creature that is not normally possible between humans. That's not true, by the way. But here we go. It's not yes or no, it's simply not true, but there is no way to fit this, but I'm going to keep on because some of you, I know, will get something out of it. There is the kind of emotion Let me try it another way. Let me try it from the dog viewpoint to start with. People believe that their dog loves them. Even after I've gone through all this preface, that is really pushing it. The dog looks at you as the head of the pack. Beyond that, I could say that to some people, and I could come up with an argument from somebody else's view. Because you can take, I could describe all of a dog's normal show of affection, the wagging of the tail, the fact that if you're around a dog enough, if it's your dog, you'll begin to think that he actually smiles and grins at you. Like when you come in, you've been gone all day, and not only the tail wags, but it's like his eyes light up, and he looks at you like he is glad to see you. Here's one of these areas, this is not too much of a sidestep, but it's one of these areas, again, to where everything that goes on in life is open to two analyzations, two interpretations that people do not normally do. And here's a great one, an example. This was not the point for the night. But I could describe to a person, if I was talking to someone who already given me this story that I've done for you about how much they love their dog and how much the dog means to them, and probably the dog's love and affection and his relationship or her relationship to the dog is probably means more to them than most of their relationships with other humans. And so I could listen to all that. And I'm sitting there watching the dog and how much they seem to love each other, and the person's always hugging even while they're talking, and the dog just wagging its tail, and just constantly staring at the person like you're the all of my life. And I can say that well, the dog doesn't actually love you in the sense that friends love each other, not just family, but the friends will say, well, I love you. You just your personality. You're not related to me, but I love you. You're like a soulmate to me. Without any sex involved. I'm not talking about that. And the person will say, yeah, that's the way I feel about my dog. He is like my best friend, period. And I can say, well, the dog doesn't actually look at you as a friend. He just simply submits to you. He looks at you as a dominant force to him. And the person will go, well, you know, I took a zoology course like in college. I know something about herd animals and et cetera. Yeah, I know what you're saying. But anyway, I was going to come up with an argument because somebody could do that, and I could come up with another person's response to that. They could say, listen to this. They could say, all right, I know what you're saying, and in fact, I've thought about that. Because I remembered, anyway, they could say, I thought about that, but you know what dispels that? You know what belies the fact that he simply submits to me? I can be, it happens periodically, that maybe he has to be reprimanded. Now, we've been together now 6 years, and he knows all the do's and don'ts. I taught him immediately. He did submit to me, you're right. That's how you train a dog to start with. And he knows what not to fool with and try to open cabinet doors and all that. But let me show you that he is not simply submitting to me as being the head of the pack, that there's more to it, because well, every several years, it's like, I don't know why, but he'll just sort of throw a little fit, or I'll come home from work, and he will have opened the cabinet doors and pulled out his bag of food and knocked it over. And he knows not to do that. I mean, as soon as I open the door, it's happened like once a year or so it'll happen. And I open the door. When I come in and I know something's wrong, he will not be there to meet me, and I'll know right then. And sure enough, I go in there, and he'll be over there looking ashamed. And I can't let it go as much as I love him, and I will have to after all this time, because I remember the first time, it was only a couple of years ago that this happened. It had been years since I had to reprimand him. And so I took him over, and I began to whip him. And at first he kind of, didn't pay any attention. He was still wagging his tail, and I realized we're so close, we never have harsh words, that he does not really understand that I'm reprimanding, so I had to do it a little harder to get his attention. And I had to grab him by the neck and say, come here. And I did it once or twice, and suddenly, rather than being submissive, he suddenly turned on me, his best friend. He suddenly turned his mouth around and went, ah. In other words, he told me, hey, wait, this is me, don't do that. And this does happen between master and dog. And the person, from their view, would say, there is your proof that there is more going on to this relationship between me and my dog than simply the submissiveness that the lower dogs in the herd hierarchy or a pack show to the head dog. Because if that's all it was in our relationship, then he would never, never, ever just turn around and say, hey, don't do that to me. He would never bare his teeth at me. There is your proof. I shouldn't have to apologize for you people for getting too obscure, because this could have been a whole nother night, and I'm going back to the main track. But did you understand, or the hint? I'll leave it to you if you want to pursue it. That can explain and not explain and super explain. It's three different possible interpretations of human life, period, of the relationship between people. Because take that beyond being a dog, take that as being a man's personality. Back to the main subject. What is it with some people? What's afoot that they can say that they feel a closeness, a love, an affection for a dog that, with few exceptions, they find with other humans? Again, assuming they're not crackpots, they're not crazy, it's not a show of hostility. They have a perfectly ordinary relationship with most other people. It does not replace the love of their family or any love that they have sexually. But they feel something singular. What is it? And it does seem to take the death for people to strike them in the way I'm doing. I'm not trying to be morbid, but rather than happen necessarily while the dog or cat's alive, it's like it's gone, and they think, I have lost something that I had no idea was going to affect me this way. What is it? And they, if you really wanted to try and be pitiful about it in some way, they would start saying, well, it's, when I come home and the house is so empty and this and that. No, no, no. That's being anecdotal. What is it that they feel the loss of? There is a kind of emotional relationship you can have with a dog or a cat, a pack animal, which is what a domesticated animal amounts to, that is generally lacking with humans on this basis. I already threw in the term purity of emotion. It doesn't mean that people's ordinary emotions for each other is in some way impure, but there's a purity of emotion on this basis. The feeling between you and the dog had nothing to do with words. It had nothing to do with thought. I assume all of you are smart enough, or at least all pet lovers. Well, if you're not, I'll remind you, you should be smart enough. The dog does not speak English. The cat does not understand Spanish. Your ferret does not comprende French. The feelings you have, the feelings that go back and forth, of course what we're interested in now is the human, from the human perspective. The emotion is not based on thought. Now, when I said that most people, it doesn't seem to strike them in the way that this may have the greatest potential impact, that doesn't seem to strike them until the dog or cat has died and they're no longer in the relationship. Because if you told a person, well, strike that. I'm going to have to get on with it. We're getting in, again, even to a greater area where there's no way to talk about this directly, but I'm going ahead. Because I am talking about it. An ordinary person, if they heard this, and they tried to make any sense of it with no great exposure previous to this sort of thing, their mind could tell them that that makes no sense. Me saying it's emotions devoid or not based upon thought. Because people, at the ordinary level, your mind's always thinking about something, and if there you sit with your dog, which means so much to you, you think about him. But just ordinarily, people living in that dream, well, I didn't say these were connected, I'm sorry. In a man's normal state of consciousness, that there you sit, and if you had heard me talk like this tonight, and now let's jump to later tonight, you're at home and you're sitting there with your dog, and some of this came back to you, and you went, wait a minute. What he said was not true, because here you sit with Rover, and you're petting him, and you're playing with him and talking. What you been doing while I was gone? Did it get cold in the house? Did you turn the furnace while I was gone? Or, you're talking to him, and if it suddenly came back what I was saying about and you're hugging him, saying, God, you mean so much to me. And then it came back to me saying, well, the uniqueness of this kind of emotional bond between a man and a dog is based upon the fact that the feeling is not based upon thought. And there you sit, and if it came back to you, you would be well within your rights, your ordinary, to adjudge what I said grossly incorrect. And go, well, here I am, I'm thinking about him right now. I'm talking to him, I'm looking at him, I'm thinking how much he means to me. I was thinking his name. I've got to be thinking about him and how much I enjoy his company, how much I love him, for me to be sitting here talking to him. I got to be thinking about him. That's true. But that's not the basis of it. When I say that it is singular, remember that's not exactly true, because people feel that for other humans. But with other humans, you're both, any emotion you have toward each other, anything you have, both of you, think about it. Yeah. With you and the dog can't think about it. And there's no way to, I warn you again, it's really beginning to fall apart, so keep listening. Fall apart verbally. You and another human, the closest friend you have in the world, your mother, your father, your sex partner, your soulmate for life. Let's say that you are the greatest, you are Romeo and Juliet revisited. Both of you still think about each other. Both of you still think about your Romeo and Julietness. Both of you think about your love, your affection for each other. Not right or wrong, you simply do. So there it is. It is a balanced, it is a reciprocal arrangement. You and the dog, somebody says, I love my dog as much, probably, as I do my wife or my ex-girlfriend. I'm not trying to compare them, just that the person says, I love this dog so much. He means so much to me, or my cat. Here's, to begin with, the dog or the cat does not reciprocate. It's mutual part of it's part of your love affair, the affectionate relationship. On its side, has no thought involved. And so this kind of arrangement between humans, half of it is already gone. That's how much it's changed. Here it becomes even more sketchy. But even from the human's view, your feeling for the animal, even I've taken away the animal side. Remember, I'm not comparing the quality, but I'm trying to get you to consider, so we can talk about it a little bit, to compare you and another human. You and your best friend, you both think of each other, or you and your love, you think of each other. It's not right or wrong, you simply do. You're human. So you think about your emotional relationship. Now you got that. So that's what I'm doing this for, to try, because words are breaking down, so let's try hand gestures. Now we go over here to you and the dog. There is no such thing as this. Half of it's gone because the dog cannot think about your relationship. But that's on the beginning of it. Once you take away half of something, part of something, what's left is not half of it when it's in the human realm. You simply do not take away 2 from 4 and got 2 left. Now you got something else. Taking this away doesn't cause it. Putting it back doesn't just, you're going to have to listen. It's beyond all logic. It's transcendental. Your feeling for the dog is not based upon, you're not left with, all right, I got you. The dog can't think about me, so the relationship's not the same as between me and another human. It's, from your view, it's not even the same now. It's not just you thinking about the dog. I know you do think about the dog, but thought is not the basis of the affection. Try a little bit more. It seems to be the potential, a greater clarity of seeing this seems to be, if you've had the experience, those who have had a dog or cat die, and then you realize, maybe you can hear a little bit of what I'm saying, that the relationship was not based upon you talking to the animal, it was not based upon you thinking, but you never thought about it in that way until it's over, and perhaps somebody pointed it out. Somebody. I just did. that what you felt was not based upon any thought. Because if you had, I'm about to make up a term, if you had the primo, the best possible relationship with your dog or cat, this is all relative, but if you had the best possible, or the greater was your love and relationship, the less you thought about him. And when I say think about, that is that you thought in the sense of judgment that the dog should be different. The greater was your love, the greater was your experience of this kind of passion, this kind of affection I'm describing that many people feel for an animal. The greater it was, the less you ever thought that the dog should be any less doggy than he was. The less you ever had any critical feeling about the dog. The less you ever looked at him and thought, you'd look a lot better if you weighed more, if you were taller, if your hair wasn't so curly. I understand this gets vague verbally. That is not possible at the ordinarily between humans. A woman can love a man, or a man a woman. It's easier to talk about because women are in a better position. It is almost impossible for men, to have the great hornies for a woman. For a man, just for his nose to be open all of his life for this one woman. He just loves her and nobody else. It is still generally impossible for him not to think critically of her. Is that understated enough? In other words, you do think about her. In the sense I'm saying think, you don't just love her, and I know it's true of women, but you don't just love her, but you think about how much more you would love her if her breasts were bigger, if her hair was blonde, whatever, if her personality was better. It does not mean that it stops her from being the love of your life. But you understand your affection, and it's not right or wrong. With ordinary people, to say it's right or wrong is just to whip them unnecessarily because they can't help it. And of course, I'm speaking to you at the ordinary level. You think about it. People do it with their parents. Relatively speaking, the more intense, the more your relationship was this kind of singular affection I'm describing that many people feel for their pet. The more that was true, the less you ever engaged in that. I guess in ordinary ear this could sound funny, like people sitting around criticizing their dog because it doesn't have blonde hair. But there is an amount, is what I mean by thinking about the pet. If you're sane, it just does not strike your mind. Let's put it that way. It just is not normally part of your thinking vocabulary about the dog to criticize it. If you love the dog, and he's past the point you've house-trained him and all that, so that you do not have to be involved in that kind of reprimanding, what is there to think about the dog if you're sane? Well, God, I love you, Rover, but if you just had curly hair, if you just had long ears like that dog down the street. Of course, all of that, I'm just having to try to give you a specific example. It's a general feeling. Last time we were taping, if you who noticed, I threw in a quick news item I wrote that said, those who laugh at and feel superior to animals are superior to no one. I didn't want to comment on that night. It would just kind of lay the groundwork. And literally, I repeat again, this falls apart. You could not talk to a sane person about this and push it to the point of saying that you meant it literally or just scare the hell out of them. They just dismiss it. But when I'm talking about, when I mentioned that a man does not sit around if he truly loves a dog and thinks, well, God, you're great, but your ears, if your ears were just longer. It's not just that. I just had to bring a specific example. It's the feeling of any criticism that in any way you have an argument with the dog's dogginess or the cat's cattiness. That in any way you feel like, well, as dogs go, you're not bad. Because anybody's sane, and you don't have to now, we can go past the point of whether you're specifically the kind of pet lover I'm talking about. For a person to look upon, just to see a National Geographic on PBS, and there goes a hippo, and for a person to think, God, are they ugly? You got to admit, when I get in an area where words have absolutely no meaning, they almost have no meaning. Unless you're listening this literally tonight, and of course you were, but now you think, well, this whole thing's crazy, which is one sure sign when you're in an area where you realize it's just whatever you're talking about can't really be talked about, or it wouldn't sound so potentially insane. Simple and insane. It's either simple and true or simple and insane. But in a way to look upon, and I can change that a little bit, those of you who got that, not just laugh at a hippo or go, God, is that ugly? It's to look upon any aspect of the non-mortal world. I can make it even more ridiculous. What kind of person would ever walk past, you're walking through the forest and suddenly there's this one tree and you go, God almighty, have you ever seen such an ugly tree? Or wait a minute, look at that mountain. Yeah, God damn, ooh, what an ugly mountain. Which is a feeling of superiority. That mountain does not fit my conception of what a mountain should be. If those of you that have experienced or understand what I'm saying at all pointing to, there is a kind of purity of emotion, and it's not that, in a sense, it's not that far removed from what your dog would feel with another dog, except you're not a dog. But it's not based upon thinking. It is emotion, and it's about the only time that most people have any experience close to it of having emotion that's proper, in this sense, between you and an animal, that is not thought-based. Does that tell you anything? Anybody followed any of that? About why people believe that they may be living, or why it will strike some people they may be living in a state less than fully realized. And although it's referred to normally as consciousness or being, is it not people seeking some greater, some direct passion for life? Most people feel like from other people, from my fellow man, to be charitable, to do good works, or just be able to love other people, better relationship. Is it to improve the relationships you got? People have been trying that for people still trying it through psychiatry, analysis, religion. What if the passion they have cannot be improved or changed, but it's a different type they're looking for? And it's the idea of being more awake, of being in a state of consciousness that makes our normal state seem like awake. Might it be a kind of passion that is not tied, that is not based upon, that is not directly dependent upon thought?